This is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today I'm going to talk about, last night I had a pretty interesting experience. I went to a Democrat debate, which I says Undercover. Undercover is kind of like a little clickbaity, but people, I guess, did not know I was Republican. And when a friend invited me, they were Republican, and it was right in my hometown. And so when I saw my friends when I was walking in the theater, I was like, you know what? Let me not sit next to them because I don't want people to know, because I don't want people to treat me differently or to possibly treat me differently when we have conversations and stuff. So I went ahead and found a nice seat next to someone else who lived in my city. Nice old lady, and we sat down and enjoyed well, I will say what's interesting, I guess, and I'll go from there. But before I jump into all that, which it was interesting, it was between Haley Stevens and Andy Levitt. And so they're both running for Congress in the 11th district. Haley is the current person in the 11th. He's in the 9th, I believe. But because of redistricting, they are now going to come to a head. So they were having a debate. They also had some other candidates speak. There was a Republican there that I don't want to rag on my own side, but it wasn't the greatest. If you need some help, like some pointers or something, let me know. But or let somebody know. But it wasn't great. So I don't want to really tear someone from my side down too much, but I do want to say something to just a little life advice. So I feel like I got to mention it, and I got to be fair and just tell my experience. So before I jump into all that, I do also want to touch on CNN Plus is like dead already, gone, like trash. Like they're getting rid of it. They invested so much money in it and it's already failed. I don't understand why they thought it was going to be successful, but gone already. So I want to talk about that. And we can see why it's so trash. For example, Brian Stelter had a teacher on that went viral because Libs of TikTok posted one of their videos talking about, they're upset about the parental rights and education bill, what they call the Don't Say Gay bill, and they run their hysteria. And I also want to play a video from MSNBC, some of their hysteria and the pushback on that. And something else Jen Psaki said. I know we talked about Jen Psaki yesterday, but there's still more crazy to go around. So I want to get to all that. I think I'll talk about my experience at the debate first before I hit those news stories. So it's a good tea episode of Black Tea. So I thank you guys for being with me. People in the comments, I see your love. People saying I'm your favorite, and I think those are diamonds or they're heart or something. I don't know. Thank you guys very much for being in the chat. Appreciate you guys. Make sure that you're sharing the live, sharing the stream. If you go to blacktnews.com, check out different articles on the website, which I will have a write-up more thoroughly of the debate and some of the topics and quotes and stuff. I'm just going to spitball and tell the story here today. But I'll have some more quotes and other things like that in a piece when I write that. But go to the website, check out different articles, check out different videos. Please check out different merchandise that I have available at the store on blacktnews.com. That does, of course, help it out. We got the Make Crack Whack Again, Trump 2024. And of course, that's a dig on the Biden administration, the crack pipe thing, which they denied that, but it wasn't a good denial at all in the least bit. I don't believe them, and I just don't. I got a bunch of pro-gender stuff for females, sex and gender, they are tied together. So like the XX Club, I got those in kind of different styles, and some skirts, and actually a dress as well. The dress is pretty cute. You guys can find that at the website. I got the Black Tea mug, You Are Not That Special shirt, My Money, My Business, all kinds of other stuff. And again, I do write books as well. You guys can go to blacktnews.com, hit the merchandise, and it'll take you there's a banner that'll take you to my book website so you can learn more about my books. I write historical fiction, I write contemporary fantasy, romance, action, adventure, children's books and chapter books and stuff. So check out what I got on the site. I do want to thank Writer Mission Pack. I'm in their studio today. If I say something today that triggers you, I don't care. They don't care. Nobody cares. It doesn't work like that. But they do like to uplift conservative voices. So I do appreciate that highly about that group. And if you like what I do here, please make sure you go to blacktnews.com and hit the donate button and consider leaving a gift on the site. Before we jump into the juicy debate, I do have, well, it's just a meme from one of my favorites. A drawing, and of course it's Brian Stelter. This is from George Alexopoulos. On Twitter, his handle is gprime85. But I'm assuming this didn't take him much time. But I just thought it was funny. And CNN Plus is gone, has bit the big one, as I said, and I think it's funny, because it's what they rightly deserve. And I mentioned the other day, someone said, "Oh, my potato head." Oh. I don't understand. Like, they were advertising like Don Lemon has a talk show on CNN Plus, and it's like people don't watch Don Lemon now, and he's on like their cable. Like, he's a distant third in like his like group, time slot and stuff. They just don't get that kind of ratings. Their ratings did much better when Trump was in office, and they milked January 6th for all they could, and then they got old. And then it just didn't make any sense to me that they thought CNN Plus would work unless they had like a major shakeup, but they would have to do that before they invest and try to get people to pay for that service when their regular stuff didn't pan out. So Libs of TikTok was actually laughing about it because they get way more impressions as with zero background in journalism on Twitter or whatever from one post than what CNN, is able to get within like their entirety of CNN Plus. So I got no sympathy for them, and I think it's funny. I think it's pretty darn funny. All this money, all these talking heads, this brain power, and they couldn't make it work. But anyway, last night, so a friend let me know that the debate was going on, and it was in my hometown. So I went ahead and went there. And when I came in, there were people still in mask of all different ages. And I would say maybe about a third of the room maybe were masked, kind of spread around. I did think it was curious. The setup to me kind of seemed like maybe, I wouldn't say half and half was black, but maybe a little more than half of the room was white, and then a lot of other people were black. And it seemed like the black people in the room, from my observation, seemed more Team Haley, and Levin brought a bunch of progressive white folks to cheer him on. That was my perception. There were definitely a lot of Levin's folks on one side of the room, and they were very rowdy. Like they said, like, please be respectful of people who get up here. And when the Republican got up to talk, they did end up triggering Andy Levin's crew. I'm not saying it was only Levin's people, but it was very notable from that side of the room. And they started booing and heckling to the point where after it was over, and the commentator, from my angle, kind of seemed like they were laughing a little bit in the back, or found it amusing. I don't know if laughing's, well, strong to say laughing, but it seemed like they were a little amused by the interaction of the crowd, or just maybe how bad the Republican was doing, to be honest. And then they came out, they're like, come on, guys, you got to be respectful. And then the black folks who were Team Haley were looking over at the Levin sides like, y'all you came there to act a fool. And I just thought it was funny because, you go it's in the theater, and there's all these stereotypes about black people talking during movies and other kind of stuff like that and being loud. And they're the ones looking sideways at the white people for being too loud and rowdy and disrespectful. So that was amusing to me. So they had the one of the candidates for the Michigan Supreme Court speak. She didn't say anything radical and really worth reporting. There was some other people who spoke, but when the Republican got up to speak, um, he spoke behind the podium with a speech, and everyone else who came in to talk to the crowd just got the mic, addressed the crowd. You could feel kind of, it was like familiar energy, and of course it was not a familiar environment, it wasn't a friendly environment, but it felt more awkward and maybe a little tense, but it wasn't hostile. So when you're in a situation, um, if you're a Republican and you're talking to someone who's across the aisle and you want to try to get them to vote for you, the most important thing I will say, this is advice, broad advice, you can take it, you can leave it. But what you need to do is you don't need to change who you are. And I don't want you to change your message, but you do need to tailor it to that audience, and approach. You have to approach your argument in a way that they understand, I guess. Like a lot of Democrats, they feel that they are the party of compassion. That's their thing. And they see like Republicans, they're facts, 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 in a way that they spout that as a very uncompassionate sort of way. But you have to explain why your views are more compassionate. And we believe that our views and the facts and stuff line up, and uh, ultimately, for example, if you're going to talk about personal responsibility and kind of that outlook on life, if you make better decisions for yourself, for your family, like if you graduate college, graduate high school, don't have kids out of wedlock, and get a job, keep a job, those things can keep you permanently, not, you won't be permanently poor in America, according to left wing, right wing think tanks and stuff. So that's a pretty accepted fact. We know that if a father is in the home, that does a child's more likely to go to jail, more likely to commit crime, more likely to repeat the cycle, etc. Blah blah blah. So instead of focusing on just pouring money on a problem or something like that, focusing on personal responsibility or something. And that's for the better of the community, that's for the better for the child, etc. So you just have to explain your policies in a way that makes sense, in a way that people can relate to, but just, being like sort of aggressive, like going in. And I'm not saying they were like that totally, but um, you have to find a way to find that middle ground. So it was very much a stump speech that you would just give like in any sort of normal circumstances, and those weren't normal circumstances. When I ran for state rep, and I went door to door in my home city, which is very dim, I go to people's doors and I say, I'm running because I believe that parents should have a say. That should be the biggest authority figure as far as what happens in their child's life, and not the government. And the thing, the darndest thing is that most people agree that the government is corrupt. There's just people who want to compromise about using the government and allowing it to be big because there's things that they want, so they allow it to just get bigger. But most people, like at their core, like have a distrust of it. So you tell like a parent, like, I believe that you're the one who's supposed to be empowered, they agree with that. So that those are kind of like talking points I would lead with, and we'd have a conversation, and by the end of it I would say, I am a Republican, and then they would say, you know what, that's okay, because we found some common ground. But you can't just go in there guns a-blazing, like with like sort of normal like stump speech that you would give to a very conservative crowd. So um it didn't pan out. It didn't work out well. And so when they started heckling them, they mentioned 5-year-olds being indoctrinated with sexual education stuff, like what we've seen around, stuff that Libs of TikTok posted. But there's a lot of folks on the left who, and mind you, there are some very, 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 very progressive people in the room who don't believe it, or they don't believe that it's like I was arguing with someone the other day, like, show me where it's a widespread problem. Like, why does it have to be a widespread problem? How many children have to be victimized in this sort of way? before you think we should do something about it. And they wouldn't give me a number, of course, but I'm like, what does that mean, and why did you add that requirement of widespread? And I don't even know what numbers would dictate that. But they wouldn't specify. They just thought that was a good argument at the time, but they couldn't substantiate it. So there's some people who don't buy into that narrative or whatever, and so they just start booing them. And then they're like, "Did you vote? Do you believe Joe Biden is a president? Did you support insurrection?" And so people, they were started heckling them. So it was awkward, and it was kind of hard to watch. So when that was over, the actual debate began between Haley Stevens and Andy Levitt. And Andy Levitt is Levin. I'm sorry, Andy Levin is very, very progressive, very extreme. And between the two of them, I I thought she had a better debate than him, in my opinion. And I think Haley, just as an objective observer, I wouldn't vote for them either way. It would be better for Democrats to go with Haley, because I think she would reach out more to the district as someone who appears moderate. Now, I don't really think she's moderate, but I guess when she's up on stage next to Andy Levin, yeah, sure. And so, but what struck me about Andy Levin, they're like, well, what's the most important things to you guys? And so he'd say something like climate change. And I'm just thinking about, but he also like laid it on super thick the entire night about like racial injustice and reaching out to the BIPOC community and all kinds of systemic racism. He actually like denounced equality at one point, because he said, you can't do equality when things aren't equal, and so that's why we need equity. And equity, an example of equity, it would be like there's school districts out there, or isn't the whole state of Oregon, was it Oregon that was like, we're going to get rid of requirements for like um for certain requirements in school to pass high school. and that because minorities or whatever might not be able to meet those standards. So it's like you Frankenstein stuff. You either lower expectations, or you do something unfair to one group, and you have to Frankenstein your own sense of equality, instead of just making sure there's equal playing field and trying to make sure that people can rise to that occasion, or help people where they're at. You have to like bring someone else down to achieve your, I don't know, your crazy sort of utopia. So that's an example of like equity. And so I my mouth probably dropped when he said that. And there were a couple times, I think, like, if someone was watching me, they'd probably be like, I don't think she's one of us, because but I made a couple facial expressions of some of the things that he said. But back to the climate change thing, that's not something that's high on the priority list for Black people. That's very, very low at the bottom. And actually, like, racial stuff is as well. Maybe I still have the Pew poll in here. Looks like I don't. But the other day, there was Pew Research that came out, and it was just really, really low as far as like climate change and even this racial stuff. As far as like Black voters go, so he's beating on a drum that, I don't know, may get some sound bites from his little cheerleading crowd, but in reality, people are concerned about violent crime. Violent crime was like number one, and then it was like inflation and other stuff like that, economy. So that's where people's minds are at, not the kind of stuff that Levin was really sort of pointing to. And then at the same time, he mentioned like climate change, but then Haley would talk about like bills that she actually got done, like that were like environmental. And so I'm like, to me, it seemed like he's talked a game, but she's kind of seemed like she delivered. So listening to the debate, I thought she did I know. I thought she would be a better choice for them if they went that route. Another one thing that he said that I probably raised an eyebrow with is he said that he believed people who were locked up for marijuana should get reparations. And when I told my family that, they were just like floored. My mom's face was so funny. And then they're like, what about these people who lost their businesses? What about, they just start naming all these ways that the government has harmed people. And and they're like, but why would that be the focus where you'd want to dish out money for people? They're like, did they not commit the crimes like when they happened? And so, but that's where he was at. Someone in the crowd asked a question directed at Levin there, and they didn't allow us to ask questions. We wrote stuff on cards, and they only read like a couple, maybe like 3. I did write out a question. I'm pretty sure my question never got up to the podium. I gave it to a woman, and she like went to the kind of outside, and I was watching her to see if she was going to bring my question up, and it just never made it up there from what I saw. So I didn't suspect that they would read my question, but I tried. But one of the questions that was directed toward Levin was, well, this district, we worked really hard to flip this seat for Haley. So who do you think you are to come in when we worked so hard for her and to run? And so he's like, well, I think the voters get to pick. So basically he made the case like, if you want me, vote for me. If I fit your values, and vote for me, and whatever. And so Haley Stevens pointed out, like, in the 9th district where John James is running, like, you could have been there running against John James, but you're here like running against me. And and then Levin was like, my house is still in this district, like I still live here. And which he could have pointed out that she had to move to run in the 11th, but he didn't do that. So it was a missed opportunity for him. But I don't know, that was kind of like an emotional, aggressive sort of question. And then someone asked Haley Stevens, why would she take money from this pro-Israel PAC when they give money to people who supported January 6th or something like that? Well, they're talking about like Jim Jordan and other folks like that. And so she's just like, I support Israel, and I'm not going to apologize for that. And they're like, well, it wasn't about support for Israel. It's about taking the money. And I'm just thinking, like, why would she not receive that money? So I have a suspicion about who asked the question, because that was definitely 11 person in the audience who obviously asked that. And so at the end of the night, when it was over, I did talk to 2 elected officials. One was a city council person from, I don't remember which city, and then another person was a county commissioner from Troy. But I did hear the councilwoman mention that they read one of her questions. If I had to wager, I would assume that was probably her question. They were super progressive on her side, man. Super, super progressive on her side. And the conversation I had with the county commissioner from Troy, we started talking about capitalism, and he believes we are all oppressed by capitalism because we are forced to do things that we don't want to do in order to pay for food and for our families and stuff. And I don't know what other worlds people want to live in or think they can create where people don't have to do things that they don't necessarily want to do to survive in the world. I don't understand that. And then he said I was oppressed, and I'm like, everybody knows I didn't like my job at Target, so I was like, well, I'll give you that I didn't like my job at Target, and it kind of felt like an oppressive environment. But these skills or whatever. So my next job that I went to was a sales job, and that was a job where I had to push myself out of my comfort zone every day. I'm extremely introverted. I know you guys probably don't believe that, but it's true. But I said one thing that I did appreciate it, even though it was uncomfortable and it was a challenge, was that my merit and my skill was a reflection of what was on my paycheck, as opposed to what happened at Target. And then I was really like upset when they gave me my raise, and it was like 6 cents or something ridiculous like that. That like kind of broke my heart and my spirits and stuff. And so going to an environment that, even though I had to do something that made me uncomfortable, at least my work ethic paid off, and I could see it on the paycheck. So I at least like that better, though, not everybody likes commission sales and stuff. A lot of people hate it. you got to be a kind of special person to really like it and enjoy it. Um, so there were things that I learned and really appreciate about that time there, though, even though I was uncomfortable, because it gave me other skills that I could deploy within, you know, politics when I went on to do politics and stuff. Even pushing myself to some of the stuff that happened last night was probably just a result of that journey I had every day going to work and overcoming objections to customers and asking when they like don't want that service plan, and I had to convince them to get that service plan and be prepared and do those trainings and whatnot. That still helped me acquire skills that I even used last night, I would say. So um people pretending like responsibility isn't a good thing is just insane to me. And he invited me out for coffee, and I was maybe I'll still go. Maybe I'll still have me. But he was when it was over, he's like, I felt like I listened, I talked a lot, but I want to listen more, and I want to be part of your journey. And I'm just thinking, like, dude, you're not the least persuasive. But perhaps I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. So at the end of the night, when I came out the theater, Haley Stevens was there. And again, she's a congresswoman for the 11th. So they had talked during the debate about reproductive rights. And Levin talked about putting in the Constitution that you have a right to the reproductive rights. And they're talking about abortion. That when they, talk about abortion, they don't include the fetus, the baby, within the conversation. They make it all about women's health care, women's choice, women's reproductive rights, etc. So Levin was gone, I think, but Stevens was right there. So I went up and introduced myself, and told her who I am. And she's like, well, "What do you do?" I said, I run a blog." And she's like, "Oh, what's the name of the blog?" And I'm like, "Black Tea News." And so I said, "Well, one thing, you guys were talking about reproductive rights, and I understand that." I said, "But what about like the unborn baby? Like, do you think that they have a right to life at all?" And then so it was a little awkward, and she's like, "Well, I know women who've had miscarriages," and I don't know why that was relevant, but and she's like, "And I've known women who've had to have abortions for medical reasons," which, by the way, most pro-life people believe that if you really need one for medical reasons, if you really have a medical emergency, especially if it was like late in the game and stuff, the most safest way is to induce normally. So that's a very, very, very rare reason why women actually do abort. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but that is an exception that pro-lifers tend to have, because we're against the deliberate killing of the unborn and believe that they have a right to life. But the woman also has, a right to life. And it's about, if it comes into play to a place where it's about where you have to make a decision to preserve one life or another, that's a different story than both lives could be preserved, but you choose to take one out for most of the time, reasons of convenience and stuff. So and she said, and she mentioned that she does believe in the right for a woman and her doctor to choose and invest between her and her doctor. And then she was like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, I'm from this city. And she's like, "Where'd you go to school?" And I told her where I went to school. And then I'm like, "But you didn't answer my question." So that's overcoming objections. or good, kind of, learn there from that experience, I guess, from work coming back. And I'm like, "Do you believe in the right to life?" And she's like, "I believe we all have the right to life." I'm like, "But when does that begin? Does it start in the womb? Like, do you believe the unborn have a right to life at all?" And then she's like, "Oh, you're really digging deep there." And I'm like, I think it's a pretty straightforward, simple question. And it ended with her kind of like smiling hard and being like, "Oh, okay, it's nice to meet you." And she wouldn't answer the question. She completely wouldn't answer the question. So oh, it's Troy City Council and Ferndale Commissioner. Thank you, Jacob, in the chat. Correction there. So it was interesting, and I was pretty like excited about my night after it was over. But I'm not surprised that she wouldn't answer the question in the least bit, because you and a lot of these cases is just not justifiable. And I've had a lot of abortion debates, especially like on TikTok and other stuff, and I've watched a lot of lives, been on a lot of lives. And the best sort of defense is to pretend like the fetus, the baby isn't there at all. And so that's why they have that language of it's about reproductive rights, it's just the woman's choice. And I think the only relevant questions is it a life, and that's really not up for debate. Like, is it alive? Um, Whether you consider it valuable is another question, and I kind of don't care about that. Is it alive? And we know it is at conception. That is your point of origin as a human being. So when that's established, so when does the right to life kick in? And if you are a person who believes, like Hillary Clinton said, according to our laws, it doesn't begin until, you know, the unborn don't have a right to life. That does open up the gateway for like unrestricted abortion at any time, any place, anywhere, any reason, especially if you believe that a woman has a right to do that and the unborn don't have a right to life. So there's a lot of slippery slopes out there. So if people like Levin want to have it in the Constitution. Gretchen Whitmer is fighting to have it in our Michigan Constitution. I don't think people understand the repercussions of what they are advocating for. And if politicians cannot answer whether or not, or they're not brave enough to answer when the unborn have a right to life, then they shouldn't touch this. They shouldn't touch it. Let the people brave enough to at least say what it is, handle it. You can vote blank in the ballot box, and if that, signing legislation, vote present if you got to. But if you cannot answer that question, I don't think it should be part of this conversation. Let the brave people who at least acknowledge the science and whatever have those discussions if you're too chicken. So, not surprised. Sure, Levin probably would have, I know, given a similar response, but I kind of would have liked to have that conversation since he's a dude, and a lot of dudes feel like you just gotta pass it off to the women. Like Beto was like, "Oh, it's just a woman. It's a woman's choice. Whatever." It's like that's a cop out. That's a really big cop out. I was on a live last night on TikTok with some friends, and there was a pro-choice woman who believes in no restrictions. That's what she advocates for, no restrictions on abortion. And she was saying that pregnancy that you can't like have it terminate is coercion, and she was saying consent to sex isn't consent to pregnancy. And she ended up getting booted. I wasn't hosting the live, but my friend AJ like kicked her from it. And he was like, we're not gonna do this. Like, if you're not even gonna like acknowledge that you know that sex can lead to pregnancy, and you're just gonna pretend like that's not a thing. He's like, we don't have a conversation. And so she posted that snippet and was laughing about the men, kicking them off. And there's so many women in her comments. Well, not so many women, but the women in her comments were like, "Oh, they. What about the women didn't do it alone? And what about the responsibility of the men?" And I'm just like, "But you guys are the one advocating for this ultimate authority on life and death. Like that's a deflection, total deflection." And they laugh because they don't think men should be in the debate. And all the time you see women like in comments when men are talking about it, like, who said a man can speak on this? No uterus, no opinion. I'm like, that's their kid. That and not specifically maybe in that situation, but it's the men have children as well. Like the women are the ones who bear it and carry it and stuff. But as they said, they don't make it alone. Women don't will it into an existence. That is their progeny. Men have every right to fight for the life of the children. Every right. And it really, really bothers me. I think I'm gonna do a live where it's like men only, just to see the feminists in the comments squirm and be all ticked off about it. Because man, they hate when pro-life men stand up for the unborn. But when a pro-choice man gets up and talks, they're totally allowed to do that. So it was an interesting night. I think that the most interesting was that conversation I had with the guy from Troy. Um that was the most interesting thing. But I was glad I got that conversation with Haley Stevens. Now, is there another question that I could have asked that would have been a better sort of gotcha moment that could have, I don't know, been used as a soundbite that the Republican Party or somebody could use for election time? Yeah, but I asked the question that was important to me that I think people should be challenged into answering. So I'm glad that I asked that question. The question that I did want them to ask though on the debate stage that I gave them card to, that they obviously didn't ask, and I don't think the moderators ever saw it. I said the Michigan Democrat Party posted on their Facebook page that parents don't have a right to determine like the educate what their children learn. So I asked, do they denounce that view and will they support transparency legislation? So I thought that was a fair question because that's totally what the Michigan Democrat Party did put a post that we don't know where people got this idea that parents are the ones who are supposed to decide what their children learn. Like the client is the society, not the parent. And they're like the parent can decide, but they have to do private school or something like or charter school or something like that. And so the questions that people were asking was like, who the heck is the society if it's not the parent and the taxpayer who's like funding the schools with their property taxes? And what the heck does a society want the children to know that the parent apparently doesn't want them to know or disagree with? And so when I saw people first sharing that post, I'm like, is this real? And there were Republicans asking that had the courtesy to ask, is this real? Because it was pretty unbelievable because it was so radical. And it was still on their Facebook page. Now, I used to be working for the Michigan Republican Party, and I wasn't the one in charge of posting stuff on social media. I was the one who made the stuff that went on social media. That was my job. I My office mate Ross liked to say that I made the bullets and he fired them. But there were times when I would post when the digital director, whether it's him or his predecessor, who I adored them both, but when they were like sick or out of town or something like that, or vacation, I would post, and I still had I had some bit of discretion, but a lot of stuff had to be like okayed from like upper management. I don't know how structured things are at the Democrat Party, but I do know if I had made a post like that, it would not have lasted 5 minutes because activists would have been right on that and they would have been calling the building nonstop. My bosses would have come in super angry, and I would assume I probably would have lost a job for that. Something like that, like election shattering, like probably would have lost my job. I would think maybe. And I think there would have been a statement about that, like a serious reprimanding. Now the Democrats they had up there for a minute, and probably, and I would say probably because that's their sentiments. But when you get people on the right and the left making such a fuss about it, it starts making national news. Yeah, they took that down, and they claim, well, this view isn't the view of our candidates. Well, I would like to hear the candidates denounce it themselves. So I thought it was a very fair question for them to ask, what they did not ask. So is what it is. So there was another question that was asked. I think it was regarding like police reform or justice or something along those lines, mass incarceration maybe. But the person in front of me asked the question, and they were really mad because they did not feel that Levin answered the question, and he went around the question. So the commentary from the people around me was pretty funny. But in my opinion, I thought Haley definitely came off as a safer choice for them in the general, and she is the current congresswoman of the 11th. But Levin is too left for me. They're both too left for me, but Levin is way too left for me. But he also seems really out of touch, and they both did touch on social justice kind of stuff, but he really laid it on, in my opinion. They did also ask, um, would they be willing to do whatever they can, I guess, in Congress to shut down Line 5, and that's like a pipeline that's in our like Great Lakes and stuff. And Levin was like, yes, absolutely. Like, shut that down. I will do what I can in Congress, blah, blah, blah. And Haley Stevens' answer was like, I always support the Great Lakes. So very not specific. So she definitely had I think she has the general in her mind. So I think she's more sort of forward thinking and strategic in that way. Even though people that I was with thought that Levin was kind of more skillful and seasoned in maybe how he went about the debate. But I don't know. That wasn't necessarily my opinion though. I thought she made some wiser choices. In my opinion, as far as how she answered questions and went about things. Um, but Levin, like I said, super left wing, and I don't want either of them to win, but I definitely don't want him to win. I definitely don't want him to win. So, interesting night. Interesting night. I wonder if Haley Stevens will look up Black Tea News, or anyone else. But I wonder how much Undercover I can kind of go through. Someone was like, "You look so familiar," and I'm just thinking, please don't have recognized me from that picnic, Democrat picnic that I went to last year. But they're like, "Did you work on such and such campaign?" I'm like, "No, I didn't. I just have one of those faces." And I didn't recognize her, but people tell me, ask me all the time, do I look like such and such? But I was in Pontiac, and my family's from there, and like you can't like barely go anywhere without hearing someone say, "Oh, are you Gino's daughter?" or something like that. So a lot of people know my family, especially in that city. But it was fun. It was very fun. Have to do some more. In I don't know how long I can remain as an unknown actor though, but I guess I'll do it for a little more while. So let's talk about CNN. CNN Plus is dead. Here's an article from CNN Business. CNN Plus, streaming service that was hyped as one of the most significant developments in the history of CNN, will shut down on April 30th, just 1 month after it launched. CNN Plus, sorry, this is funny. CNN customers will receive prorated refunds of subscription fees, the company said. The decision was made by new management after CNN's former parent company, Warner Media, merged with Discovery to form Warner Brothers Discovery earlier this month. So that's another interesting thing. Like they didn't decide to just kind of absorb it into like them, and they're like, oh well, our subscribers will be your subscribers or whatever. They were like, we're gonna get rid of this, and they invested a lot of money in it. So maybe they kind of suspected at CNN that this might be a possibility, and maybe that's why they launched it prior to like the merger, because maybe they're hoping that it would do really well, and that they could kind of state their case to not get rid of it. But obviously, that did not happen. The prior management team's vision for CNN Plus runs counter with Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav's plan to house all the company's brands under one streaming service. CNN Plus programming may eventually live on through that service. Other programming will shift to CNN's main television network. In a complex streaming market, consumers want simplicity and an all-in service which provides better experience and more value than standalone offerings, and for the company a more substantial business model to drive out future investments in great journalism and storytelling. Discovery streaming boss JB Perrette said in a statement, "We have very exciting opportunities ahead in the streaming space, and CNN, one of the world's premier reputable assets, will play an important role there." Perrette added, an incoming CNN CEO, Chris Litch, notified staffers of the decision in a meeting on Thursday afternoon. Litch bluntly told employees it was a uniquely bleep situation. Hundreds of CNN staffers CNN Plus staffers may lose their jobs. Litch said in an internal memo that all CNN Plus employees will continue to be paid and receive benefits for the next 90 days to explore opportunities at CNN, CNN Digital, and elsewhere in the Warner Brothers Discovery family. Staffers who aren't absorbed elsewhere in the company will receive a minimum of 6 months of severance, he added. Litch said in a town hall style meeting that the staffers that this was an incredibly successful launch. Okay, but simply incompatible with the newly merged company's plans. Yeah, it wasn't successful at all. They had like less than 10,000 daily viewers. It is not your fault that you had the rug pulled out from underneath you, he said, as he vowed to minimize the impacts to the staff. One CNN Plus staffer at the town hall described the sentiment as total and utter shock that morphed into despair. At first, people were really freaking out, explained the person who requested to privacy for candidly described as a situation, and then toward the end of the meeting it just turned to sadness. Every team was just huddling each other, which that's sad. Like I've been in a situation like where you were like, I don't know, ready to go, whatever, and they call them the team and they're like, some of you may lose your job and some of you may be let go when things didn't quite go as planned. I can feel for that. But again, I don't understand why they thought this would be a good idea. And so maybe they did try to launch it to show Discovery that it was worth keeping separate in that regard. But I would assume even if they do add some specific CNN stuff to the streaming, that you have to pay for rather than watching on the cable, it's not gonna be a lot of the stuff that they made specifically for CNN Plus. So that's funny. They just were not getting the sort of impressions and stuff that they needed, and definitely wasn't going to make up the investment that they thought it was. But again, I don't understand why they thought it would. That puzzles me. That puzzles me, especially with people like Brian Stelter, who it's rumored that he will not be long for a job, but we shall see. He had this person that lives with TikTok highlighted on a show the other day, so I want to play this video.
This is obviously very sensitive for many people. There are many opinions about this. Sometimes when I'm scrolling through these videos, I'm thinking to myself, these are cherry-picked from random teachers in random school districts that have no relationship to my children.
So, obviously his children aren't going to be related to all children, so I don't understand the point of that narrative. Okay. And I don't understand what they mean cherry picked, because libs of TikTok will literally go to TikTok, find crazy videos, sure, that leftists are posting themselves, and will post the video. He doesn't post, she does not post snippets of videos. She posts their videos that they posted online. So to say they're cherry picked, in what way? In what way are they cherry picked? The account is very clear. It's libs of TikTok. They pick liberals from the platform TikTok, and they just show you what they say. They just show you what they say. What these people decided to put on social media out to the public. It's not in there. Like you can make videos and have them. Well, you can just not make them. That's always an option. You can have them private, and only you can see it. You can have videos posted and only your friends can see them. That is also an option. These people are publicly posting their videos, and libs of, and not in a go behind the scenes and find them in some kind of, they didn't pay to have their names blotted out, when they made their webpage kind of private. No, they or public. They actually like put it out on social media, and they take it and they repost it. That's what the page does. So to say they're cherry picked is just more nonsense for Brian Stelter. But I want you to hear more of this conversation.
However, there are also moments I might see clips out of context and think, this doesn't seem right for 5-year-olds to learn. This doesn't seem right for 6-year-olds to learn, regardless of sexuality.
Again, Again, they are not out of context. They post their videos. They don't do a bunch of different splicing. They just post the videos that people choose to post themselves. Those are the messages and the deliveries that these people choose to post themselves. It's not a matter of context. It's not a matter of context. There are people who take people out of context all the time, and they'll do it on purpose or whatever, and they'll be dishonest. Like people saying like "Don't say gay bill," like that was just a dishonest media reporting, and the media really pushed that one along with it. But libs of TikTok doesn't do what they do.
Maybe we shouldn't be talking to them about sex at all or gender at all. So how do you react to those parents? I think many parents have maybe similar reactions. What do you say to them?
No, I understand that stance. And as a teacher and a parent myself and a grandparent, I understand those concerns. However, that's not our concern from the passing of this bill. I could just say in passing the component of my family, like if I were to be married to a woman, if I say my wife said this at our vacation in Aspen, that already means that I am outing myself as gay or talking about gender and sexuality. So it's not about teaching kids about sex. It's about teaching kids from kindergarten to fifth grade about families, about the makeup of humans, just who we are as a people. And that can already cross the line of this bill. And on the Senate floor, it was very clear that that's what they were coming for. They just wanted us to go into hiding. It was a discussion of a trend, they said, that was growing in schools and amongst youth and children where they're turning gay. So they're afraid that we're going to turn their children.
So, just FYI, the Gay Man's Choir out in California did put out a song literally last year entitled "We're Coming for Your Children," and there are lyrics like "We'll convert your children." So there's that. And also in California there was, which Libs of TikTok covered this story, but and so did Abigail Schreier, that there was a group of teachers that taught other teachers how to have these gay clubs and recruit kids and to do them secretly in a way that, and especially in conservative areas, and to do them in so those parents wouldn't find out. So they say that as if that's ridiculous, and maybe they feel that way because they're like, oh, your gender, your gender expression, it is what it is, and they'll make the case that you're born gay, but at the same time, like, do not remember like turning out culture, like that was a thing, like was it 10 years ago at least, or maybe longer than that, like I so pretending like that, like that's so obscene when literally people put out songs like "We're coming for your children." um Alarm bells, alarm bells, alarm bells. And then when you do see an actual trend of transgenderism, and then there's people who may have questions about sort of gender, but they normally grow out of it, if they're kind of left to their own devices, but you want to instill within children that the doctors got it wrong because they looked at your genitals but didn't know how you felt on the inside. I don't know how you cannot think that there's some kind of conversion or manipulation, influence, indoctrination going on. But I'm not gonna play this whole video. You can find that segment, but I'm gonna play what she put on TikTok, and that Lips of TikTok actually posted, and you can let me know if you think that her intent is a little more malicious than she let Brian Stelter show.
My state decided that it was a good idea to ban the use of the word gay in the classroom. Educators are not allowed to say gay in the classroom anymore. This is a life or death issue. Why do I say that? One of the most important statistics that I use in my curriculum when teaching anti-oppression, specifically about LGBTQIA issues, is 72%. You decrease the likelihood of a young trans person of wanting to commit suicide if all you do is use the proper pronouns for that person. 72%.
So what class is she teaching this in? That doesn't sound like a math class, or maybe is that a segment she breaks out during language arts? Is that a segment that she breaks in during music class, which would be an elective? Like gym class? Does it sound like gym class rhetoric to you? Um, does it sound? It doesn't sound like science, because science should be about biology, I suppose. Uh, maybe you could talk about that in a psychology class. Some high schools have a psychology class. But it sounds like she's overstepping her bounds, and this isn't about like, hey, let's draw a picture of our families. And she also gets into statistics, stuff I just don't believe. But let's go on.
You can save a life by using one, often two-letter word for a person. Misgendering someone can have them go on a spiral where they don't want to live anymore.
So if misgendering someone will send them into a suicidal spiral, this is not a healthy individual. And to not deal with more sort of root problems, and to just expect everyone to go along with it. And if you don't go along with it, they'll say you're killing kids. That's what they'll say. Like, they guilted people into wearing masks because they said you're killing grandma. If you don't say that a man is a woman and stuff, because that's what the gender they feel like, then you're killing kids. That's the sort of rhetoric that they put out there. So that's what she's pushing in the schools. That's what she's pushing in the schools.
And now we're not allowed to say gay, even if we are gay, even if we have an openly same-sex relationship, even if we're openly non-binary.
That's not what the bill says.
Or trans. As educators, we cannot talk about who we are. We exist, but we can't talk about it. And when I brought it up while this was all being discussed,
you can definitely talk about it with your coworker. Like, why do people want to regurgitate all of their life to these kids? And it's because a lot of these people are horribly insecure about different things, and they want these children to affirm their lifestyle and choices. They want affirmation from the children. They want affirmation for the children. They also sort of resent the upbringing of a lot of these kids. I mean, that's something that's also plays a part into it as well. They don't feel like the parents didn't teach them right, so these people kind of have to be the white knight saviors or whatever, and to save them. It's the new sort of othering that we talked about the other day. They feel like they have to protect the other, and they feel like they care so much, and this is how they care, and that's what they attach to, even though they can't see that it creates also other sort of harm. Again, if someone's going to spiral out of control and perhaps harm themselves because someone won't refer to them in by their pronoun, they need some help. And to just say that I'm a bully because I won't conform, and it's like the whole world isn't going to bend to your whim. And you can say, well, why don't you just do it? Because I'm not lying for you. I'm not lying for you. I still think the truth is important to maintain. So again, this doesn't sound like I don't know what she really talks about in her classrooms, but if this is like a precursor to what she actually teaches, pretending like it's about families and etc. No, it sounds like you're guilting people out of changing language and compelled speech.
some other teachers in the hallway, because I'm working at a middle school right now, had the audacity to say, no, but it's just, you can't teach about it. It's not that you can't say about it. That's not true. I can lose my job tomorrow as an educator right now just for saying gay.
So yeah, of course. So of course it's not true. And she I think she ended up admitting that on another on the same segment with Brian Stelter, but in a different clip than what I had. So Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that they push in the Brian Stelter in the media. They're still running cover for carrying water for Democrats. And again, I don't understand why. I don't understand how they feel this is a political advantage to them, but they're just really really stuck. So I want to play this crazy clip from MSNBC, and then I got to get to this Jen Psaki clip. I'm just going a little long today.
Worry that in covering Glenn Youngkin and his politics of parental choice, all the focus was on how well it worked. And even in our conversations about DeSantis, it's about how well they're serving him. The truth is, dehumanization as a tactic for politics is from war. Dehumanization is it's a tactic. It's being used right now. The Russians get their soldiers to rape children by dehumanizing them. Dehumanization as a practice is a tactic of war.
She compared Youngkin and DeSantis, people running on transparency in education, protecting parental rights, protecting children, which the bill in Florida, that's what it's really about, to Russian soldiers raping Ukrainian women. That is one of the craziest, most radical, extreme things I've heard on that network in at least a week. But they say some crazy stuff all the time. She is like competing with Joy Reid for Nut Job Award. That is crazy. That is beyond. No one is dehumanized. And when they say dehumanize, the crazy thing about that is the first thing that pops in my head about people who dehumanize people for politics. You already talked about abortion today. People say it's a parasite. People say it's a clump of cells. People just like, oh, it's smaller than a pea. It's a glob of goo. That's what like they'll tell women at abortion clinics, so to try to get them to not feel bad to go through with it. And then it might hit them tomorrow. It may hit them the next day. It may hit them 10 years down the line, etc. But it will hit you eventually. It will hit you eventually. They want to talk about that, but they need to dehumanize the baby to keep advocating and pushing for what they believe. So there's definitely a political party that loves to dehumanize, but saying that parents have rights and that parents should be able to protect their children and that educators should not conspire to hide important information regarding the health care of their child from them, that's not dehumanizing. That's not dehumanizing in the least bit. And this is such a wild thing to say.
It's being deployed in our politics, and people like you and I sometimes lose the plot and admire its effectiveness, not its substance, but even the analysis of these tactics loses sight of what this speech brings us back to, which is that dehumanization has a cost right now, as it's being deployed. There are children, and Chasten Buttigieg made this point when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was introduced. Kids will die.
Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which the Trump obviously didn't vote for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but Biden did. So for sure you voted for that guy. Someone in the comments noted that one day they were misgendered and it didn't like ruin their whole entire life. One time I went to Qdoba and it was like winter time and I was just trying to get in and get out and get my food and stuff, and didn't have any. A lot of times I actually don't wear makeup. I like put it on to do videos and stuff. I don't love to put it on. And it's just hassle and taking it off and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, I had a hat on. I just put on like a big coat, and I went to go get my food, and the person scooping up my stuff was just like called me sir, and then like just kind of glancing, and then they kind of looked up and got a better look. And then they could tell that I was female and that they had misgendered me, and they were embarrassed about it. And I just, and you know, at first there was an initial reaction of, but then then in my head I was like, you the one who came out here old, like looking busted. So cutest moment, Christina. So it's like, well, you know, that's what you get for not putting on your best face or whatever. And again, I was just getting in and getting out, getting my Cadoba, but it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a big deal. So if you can pass and people aren't asking questions, I guess kudos that you pulled a fast one over on us. But if you're failing in your presentation, and it's obvious that you are not pulling it off, I know what to say to you, bruh. But that didn't cause me to spiral, and it wouldn't cause the normal people to spiral. And if it does cause you to spiral, you need some more help than that. And guilting everyone, bullying everyone, emotionally abusing everyone else in the entire world to go along with your worldview just isn't fair. It's not healthy. It's not like, I know these people are like adamant and saying they're protecting these kids. They want to protect these kids. They want to protect these kids. But you can't just protect people by putting them in a bubble. You have to prepare people for the world, and the bubble's not even a good analogy, because you have to put everyone else in some kind of ideological bubble. So and just create a world full of dishonesty. But I don't see how you're helping kids by just making everyone lie to you. Last thing I want to show you guys is Jen Psaki interview they had with Chris Wallace, I guess, on the CNN Plus show that I guess will no longer exist. So maybe he's gonna get his own show on CNN. I did not see that yet. I wonder, man, I like to be like a fly on the wall during all this is going on, because again, he left Fox News to go to CNN Plus, and it was just a total disaster. But Jen Psaki is doing these press tours because she's going to MSNBC. Pretty unethical, but whatever.
Parents have a right to have concern. I mean, we're talking specifically here about teaching about sex in kindergarten through third grade. I have to say, as a parent, I would have problems with that.
But the law is not about teaching sex education. It's about teaching about gender identity.
It's about sexual orientation and gender identity. Okay. Some of these things, like, I got a lot of pushback. Most people agreed with me, but there was some pushback that I got when I pointed out that Blue's Clues had an episode where they were teaching like the alphabets, and they had P for pride, and they had all these different flags there. And one of them was like a pansexual flag. And I specifically focused on the pansexual flag because I thought that was the least controversial one to point out and be like, yeah, this shouldn't be here. And people were so mad. And there were people in the comments like, I'm pansexual and you didn't describe it right. And pansexual, the definition is that you have no limitations as far as your sexual attraction or your attraction to different identities or whatever. But the important thing I want to point out is no sexual limitations. So first of all, there's two genders. Like, you're, you know, unless you're willing to go after animals and lampshades and tables in the light in front of me or something, like just willing to screw everything that moves, you're not pansexual. You're just bi. You're just bi with some extra steps, okay? So I don't buy the premise that the thing even really exists unless you're like super freaky. And I just don't feel like that's appropriate for Blue's Clues, which the audience is preschool, which is like 3 through like 5, right? So, but people didn't like that, and they resented my definition, and they're like, it doesn't have to be sexual. Okay, but it's not a friendship is magic flag. Right? If we're just teaching about friendships and like, you can connect with different people and not be attracted to them. I'm like, I connect with all kinds of people that I love that has nothing to do with sexual orientation. I don't need a flag for that. So trying to do this bait and switch as if your sexual orientation has nothing to do with your sexual attraction and desires. Come on. So it is about sexual orientation. So don't try to like push that off to the side like that doesn't exist in the bill, Jen. And then gender identity. So let's go on with Jen here.
And so what do you do if a parent or a kid, should I say a kid in one of these elementary schools says, what about Sally? Sally has two moms. Or
Sally has two moms. That's okay. Sally has two moms. What about it? The teacher's not going to jail because Sally has two moms.
Or I'm not sure if I'm a girl or a boy. I mean,
so here Jin Saki is like signing on to you can pick and you choose in your gender and the gender identity and stuff. I'm of the opinion that stuff should not be in school at all, taught at all. And I will let her finish talking and then I'll tell you why.
these are kids who are experiencing, these moments in their lives. I also think that there's not a big record of there being either sex education or extensive gender identity education in these schools. And this is creating a problem or a political cudgel about an issue that I don't think exists.
So now they're saying it doesn't exist. But by the way, inflation didn't exist for the White House either. They were pretending it didn't exist, and now it's one of the biggest issues, like going into the midterms, and they're really screwed on in a really really big way. So, the it doesn't exist thing won't fly, and they're talking about like a extensive learning and training and whatever. And like I mentioned, the person that I argued with, I guess maybe it was yesterday, day before, something like that. And they're like, well, tell me where it's not a widespread thing. Why does it need to be widespread? How many victims, how many times does it need to happen before you're like, okay, something needs to be done? These people just pass an anti-lynching bill as if murder is not already illegal. Come on. So how many times does a teacher have to teach this stuff, get caught teaching this stuff in the classroom? How many lawsuits does there need to be? Because I can tell you of at least two situations in the state of Florida. Like there's the case with the Little Johns when the educators actually like put in the idea in the child's head that they don't have to tell stuff to their parents. They can keep it a secret. And they would address the child a certain way, told other staff to when they're talking about the child to dress them in the normal way when they're talking to the parents. So it was a conspiracy, and they had like a 6-page plan about their gender and stuff with the child. And one of the things that they talked about in the plan was where do they want to bunk on overnight trips. That is disturbing. That is really disturbing that kids are just picking and choosing, like, oh, you think they're going to be in the girl bunk with a bunch of other girls, and the boy's like, you know what, I feel like I'm a chick today. So how many times does Jin Saki think that needs to happen before someone's like, you know what, that's not going to be a thing? And they're really, really disregarding the mental health portion of the bill that's extraordinarily important. So the mental health portion of the bill is like you can't conspire to hide things about a parent's child regarding their mental health and their well-being. So a boy is a boy and a girl is a girl. That's decided within the womb. And this whole idea that you can switch your gender or have different expressions, you can be feminine, more feminine or masculine, and that stuff can range from person to person, sure, but it's not going to change your gender. And people who are like, gender's a construct, people let the cat out of the bag all the time that sex and gender are intertwined, because otherwise you would not need to take hormones, you would not need to take puberty blockers if it's just simply about how you feel. If you need that sort of physical, change to do all that stuff, you're trying to catch up to a physical, biological reality. And at the end of the day, that still will not change you. But don't pretend like sex and gender aren't uniquely and meaningfully intertwined. If someone's like, you know what, I think I may be a girl, and it's a boy saying that, how would they even explain that? You have adults who can't explain that. What is a woman? What does it feel like to be a woman? If that will stump a child and it will stump an adult, you cannot. Why would you teach this stuff in school if your theory just sounds like make believe? Why would any parent want that in school? Why would any teacher want that in school other than indoctrination and affirmation of your own ideology? You want to teach them things that are, pretty settled, you know, ideas of math and other kind of stuff like that, rather than, I mean, I feel like a woman, therefore I am a woman. That's no different than someone saying I feel like I'm Spider-Man, therefore I am Spider-Man. So if unless you want kids to be able to identify as everything else, teaching this sort of ideology that is just like play pretend doesn't make any sense in school. Now, there are people who have gender dysphoria, and that is a mental illness. And I would never want to wish that on anyone. But if you are saying that you have to give affirmation, that is a treatment. And you should not be treating someone's child who has a mental illness without the parents being aware of that. So parents need to know so they can go to counseling, get whatever kind of sorted out, and go from there with some kind of plan that is best suited for that child. And a lot of people who have questions about their gender do grow out of it. And maybe a kid will, a woman who believes they're a boy will just kind of grow out of that and realize that they're just a lesbian or something like that. Or people will kind of have those issues and questions, and they'll just kind of grow out of it, realize they were wrong. But there are people who self-diagnose, and we've talked about this several times, and then they realize that they made a mistake. So the White House is playing a very, very dangerous game. But teachers taking it upon themselves to set up these 6-page plans and all this kind of other stuff and hiding it from the parents, that's devious. That's devious. I don't know how many times Jen Psaki thinks that should be able to happen before local government does anything about it. And I'd like to have a very specific number from the press secretary, because she thinks it's a non-issue. But I can name a few, and I know 2 cases specifically in Florida. And people were like, well, those people in those stories were older. The mental health portion still applies to those kids. So no, we should not be accepting any gender ideology being taught in schools. Gender dysphoria is real, but you do not learn about every single sort of condition that a person may have when you're in elementary school or middle school. Again, you may have a psychology class. But that's not something that you teach in school. I'm radically against that. And there's some people have been like, K through 3, that's too low. And they probably kept it K through 3 because they wanted to be as least controversial as possible. But they didn't, we know how that went. And then I guess at that point in time, people get older and they start maybe having questions about puberty and whatnot. And then you may need to have a sex education class. So I'm assuming that kind of ties into it too. But gender identity, that shouldn't be taught in schools at all. At all. And if you're introducing the idea to a child who, like a young woman who maybe doesn't feel comfortable about her body, maybe the boys aren't into her and she doesn't feel pretty and stuff, and she starts kind of developing maybe some internalized misogyny and whatnot, and it's like, maybe life would be better if I were a boy, and someone says that you might be a boy, and they start entertaining that idea and they start going down that road, and that was introduced via them learning about it in school, which people can go on Tumblr and TikTok and other places and get those sort of ideas. But if they're like injecting that in the school, you're going to see more of an epidemic of that with kids who may not even actually have gender dysphoria. But more progressive countries who've gone down this road have begun to realize that they've made mistakes. And we read, had a pretty good article, that we read from Substack the other day, covering a couple different stories where people had regret. This is something we don't need to be pushing on our kids. And the fact that the White House is so gung-ho about it and unapologetic, it's scary, and I can't wrap my mind around why. Again, because I don't see any political advantage to it. I mean, this is the stuff that the White House is pushing, that if you love your child and they're trans, that you will give them gender affirming care. And it's not just about hairstyles and clothing and name or even pronouns, but they say you in restrooms and other facilities. So for social affirmation, the White House is saying that is a part of it. So if we want to all be part of the social affirmation, because if we're not affirming, then that could put them in danger. They might spiral and want to off themselves. Then we have to allow a trans woman into a bathroom, or trans girl into a bathroom with biological women. You just have to concede that ground. That so this seems like a very weird stance for the White House to take. But even beyond that, puberty blockers, which they have reversible on there, and there's stuff on puberty blockers that's not reversible, hormone therapy, gender affirming surgeries. It says typically used in adulthood or case by case in adolescence. So the White House is pushing top and bottom surgery for your kids. That's affirmation. If you love your kid, that's what Biden said. The best way to love your kid. Gender affirming. So no, we need to reject this everywhere. Everywhere. So, and it needs to be more than just like K through 3. I understand why they did the bill for K through 3, and I support the bill, but I would not want that in high school or anywhere. And you can say, well, there are trans kids. Yep. or kids that believe they're trans. Yep, that's true. Still don't need to teach in school. Still don't need to teach in school. I'm a Pentecostal Christian. I can count on one hand how many times we had lessons about that in school. How many times do you want to bet? That was never in the lesson plan. It's not the school's job to make everyone feel like a special little star at all times. That is not the job of the school. So anyway, I hope I know this is controversial stuff to some people, but I hope people get on that page. But I would never put my kid in a public school, so I guess some degree I don't have to worry about it myself. But I am concerned about society as a whole and the actual harm that is being done to children who are being confused and are being pushed into a fragile state, and then they realize that they get the hormones, the testosterone, all that kind of stuff, and it doesn't make them happy. I'm concerned about the irreversible damage that the White House is pushing. Thank you guys for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please go blacktnews.com, check out different articles that I've written. Please check out stuff that's on the store, like the "You Are Not That Special" shirts. And I also have them in cute little mugs as well. My Money, My Business, got the black tea mug, all kinds of other stuff like the Constitution's Glorious Liberty document, which, you want some cool 4th of July gear, especially when the libs start to try to say, oh my gosh, the 4th of July, Black people were slaves and et cetera, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, here's Frederick Douglass saying it's a Glorious Liberty document. And he said that and his famous What is 4th of July to a Slave speech, which is a great speech. You should read it because the vibe of the speech is actually just kind of like an indignant kind of call to action that a revved up, slightly frustrated conservative might give at like a right to life rally or something like that. So that's the vibe of the actual speech, not America is stupid because of whatever sort of reasons. He actually defended the Constitution and the country quite well in that speech. So if you haven't read it, go ahead and read it. Please, if you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com. Make sure following me across all my different social media platforms. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Obama did some kind of speech today, or supposed to, about misinformation. So I didn't see much clips, or I didn't get a chance to watch it yet. So I didn't comment on it. So that's probably what we'll be talking about tomorrow. But I find it rich because Obama's like the king of misinformation. Well, not even misinformation, just flat out lying to people. just flat out lying to people. So I'm sure there'll be some good snippets and irony there. And I like to trash Obama. I didn't like Obama at all. It really bothers me that people on the right are like, oh, I didn't like his policies, but I like him. And I'm like, why? He's a liar. He did a lot of bad things. Anyway, God bless you guys.